Chrissy. We are fine, thank you. Good morning to you. It's afternoon here. It's a rainy afternoon here in Serbia.
Well, it's, I'll tell you, it's sunny here in New Orleans, and it's a little cooler than usual. The high is only going to be like 73 degrees Fahrenheit today. Usually this time of year it's really hot and muggy in New Orleans, and it's like 85 degrees and 100% humidity. So it's kind of a weird day here in New Orleans as well. But you know, despite all that, I'm really glad to be connecting with you all today. I'm really excited. We still actually aren't done with construction here. We have 2 more buildings that, well, one that's almost finished and one that they haven't even broken ground yet. So I think we'll be done building by like 2017 or so. And probably by the time that the museum is done, it'll take a couple days to get through. It'll be that big. So anyway, what you see behind me is actually a Higgins boat. I'll flip around the camera in a second, but let me tell you a little bit about it. These Higgins boats here were used in every major amphibious landing in World War II. And actually the reason the museum is here today in New Orleans is because of these boats. You all might know that the capital of, the nation's capital here in the United States is Washington, D.C. So we have a lot of museums in Washington, D.C. that, are about, big, national events or groups. And so a lot of people ask us here, why is the museum in New Orleans? It seems kind of like a weird place in the U.S. for the World War II museum. It actually has to do with these Higgins boats and how they were so important to the American war effort. And I'll show you one in a second, but actually I've got a special guest here today who's not always with me every time I Skype, but I'm going to bring in Mr. Johnny, but actually I'm going to unplug it so you guys can hear. Mr. Johnny here, if you guys can hear me, we get a little closer. He is a World War II veteran. Either way, and can you tell a little bit about what you did before? Yeah, and you might speak up just because it's kind of,
I ran one of these boats through the wall. 1953, Pacific. I ran these, and he built 10,000 steel boats. He built 188 PT boats. Mr. Higgins was a boat builder, and he built ships. I don't know how many ships he built. But this is the boat that General Eisenhower said won the war. It made every invasion in the Pacific and the land.
Yep. Mr. Johnny, do you mind if I ask you, this is maybe a slightly inappropriate question, but can I ask you how old you are?
I'm 88.
He's 88 years old, and he volunteers here.
17. I went in at 17 in 1943.
Yeah. And then you volunteer here how often?
Every Thursday. I'm here every Thursday for 7 hours.
Thanks so much. I'm going to show All right. And put these back on because I can hear you guys better. I hope you were able to hear Mr. Johnny there. But if it became through a little quiet, he's 88 years old, and he volunteers here once a week, every single Thursday. This Higgins boat, as you guys know, was used in every major amphibious landing during World War II. And let me actually flip the camera around and show it to you some more. So, give me a second to do that. Alright, so here is the Higgins boat without my face in front of it. And actually, I'm going to go over here and show it to you a little bit better. What made this boat so important and so unique is that it had a ramp at the front, which you guys can see right now. And when this boat would get to a beach, the ramp would lower down, and our soldiers could unload, in seconds. 36 soldiers could fit, inside this boat, and usually a Jeep too, right? Yeah, a Jeep and maybe 10 soldiers as well could also be inside this boat. And it would take soldiers out from a troop transport ship out in open water. It would take them to the beach, and as I said, once they get to the beach, the ramp would lower down and they could unload very, very quickly. So you guys can imagine if lots of these boats unloading at one time, then we could have a huge invasion force on a beach within minutes. And so, because so many different places during World War II, there were so many, it's called a world war for a reason. These boats were used all across the world, whether it was North Africa, the Mediterranean, the Pacific. And what we talk about here a lot at our museum is D-Day, or the invasion of Normandy, France, during the war. And these boats were used in all of those locations. And as I said earlier, they were built all here in New Orleans. And that is why the museum is here today, because of these special boats. Let me just turn the camera a little bit more. You guys can see it's a busy early morning so far here at the museum. I see a school group here of, I'm guessing they're local students, here taking a tour. But let me kind of turn the camera a little bit more, show you some other artifacts that we have here. Right directly in front of me, this is kind of a funny one that students always take a second look at. This is an amphibious jeep. So it's a jeep that could go through, really through water. And it's just such a funny looking thing because it looks like a boat, on wheels, right? So that's another American artifact that we have here. But I'm going to take a walk and actually show you guys, in addition, some German artifacts that we have here too. So I'm going to keep moving my camera. Yeah, I'll let them. You got it. All right. So we're gonna, before we turn our camera up towards the ceiling so you guys can see some aircraft, I'm going to actually show you some German artifacts from the war. And the biggest thing that you can probably see here is a German anti-aircraft gun. And as you can imagine, it was called that because it would attack Allied airplanes. And that usually that gun barrel that you see in front there would be pointed towards the sky. And every once in a while, I'm going to show you in a second, we have this anti-aircraft gun actually pointed towards some of our aircraft that we have here hanging from the ceiling. So I'm going to try to give a good, I don't know, let's see here. I might have to move around a little bit to give you guys a good spot, a good shot of what here is on the ceiling. It's maybe coming into the picture right now. But what you'll see coming into the picture right now is a C-47. And that is a pretty big aircraft. And it is used for cargo and supplies during World War II, but it's also used by paratroopers. You guys maybe have heard that term before. Those are soldiers that are jumping out of aircraft, equipped with some parachutes, and they would drop behind enemy lines. And so these are the planes that would take them there. And then let's see here, what else? All right, right above me, and I might have to adjust my camera a little bit so that you guys can see it a little bit better here. Right above me here is a British aircraft. It's called the Spitfire. You can tell it's a fair bit smaller than the C-47 right here. Now, I'm actually going to show you now, this sounds maybe kind of weird, but out the window here today, so you guys can see maybe a little bit of what New Orleans looks like today. But this is actually almost the rest of the museum out the window. So there's a building that's way far back there in the corner, and in that building we have 6 aircraft hanging from the ceiling. One of them is a very large B-17 bomber plane, one of the largest planes that the United States built during World War II. Yeah, we've got B-25s in there, we've got a P-51 Mustang, lots of different planes over there. And then this building that you all see right here, remember how I told you that the museum is still under construction? This building's done on the outside, but not quite done on the inside yet. It'll be opening soon. And then this one right here across the street, you guys can see it. This one actually, it has our 4-dimensional movie in it. And it's 4D. I know that sounds weird because your seat shakes as tanks rumble by and it snows on you. At one point, which is actually bubbles. It's actually a pretty cool experience. It's called Beyond All Boundaries. So you can see some boulders going across the street. And as I said, probably today it takes a full day to go through, but when we're done, the museum is probably going to take a couple days to see everything. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually flip the camera around so you can see me again, and I'll answer, let's see here, I'll answer any questions you guys have. And I know you sent some in earlier as well. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Yes, yes.
And what I might
to have you do. I think that's what you guys are doing right now. But yeah, I might have to have you come up to the camera. Awesome.
Yes, hello.
Hey.
I'm Andrea. I have some questions.
Sure.
How did you obtain the large artifacts like tanks and planes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So sometimes these large artifacts are donated, of course, so we have people who donate. Well, artifacts large and small, people donate or they give as a gift to the museum. That happens quite often. Also, of course, we purchase artifacts. If there are certain artifacts that we think would be really great additions to our museum, we actually, we'll go out and buy them ourselves. The C-47, the big plane that I showed you above, this is kind of the most interesting story. We actually bought that on eBay. Do you guys know what eBay is? You ever heard of that before? Yeah, okay, so it's, if you haven't, it's a site where you bid on, objects, and whoever is the highest bidder, wins. And so we bought that plane and a few other artifacts off of eBay, which sounds kind of weird. So sometimes you even find your artifacts in the strangest of places. So, yeah.
Neko donira, neka kupe, neka kako nabavlja.
Yeah. Hey.
I want to ask what is the most rare and valuable thing in the museum?
I can tell you one of the things that's probably most rare, and actually, unfortunately, I can't show it to you today because it's in the building that's not yet open, but we acquired a plane called a P-40 Warhawk, and it's a fighter plane. You guys can maybe Google it, look it up on the internet after we're done. There's only about, I think, 32 of them left in the world intact. It's an early plane from World War II, and so that is one of like 32 that still remain. So I would say out of our big aircraft, that's probably one of the most, big artifacts. That's probably one of the most rare that we have. And there's a lot of things, you guys, if you think about it, when World War II is over, a lot of these, things that were tanks or planes or even ships, sometimes they, recycled or they scrap the metal to build something else. And so that's why some of these artifacts that we look at today, there aren't that many around anymore because their metal was recycled to build something else.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Nice, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Tell me, what is the most rare and/or yes? Tell me, in what way is this World War II museum different from others?
That's a great question. So we actually, it requires a little bit of story. So sorry, I'm going to tell you guys a little story. But when we opened in the year 2000, we actually opened as the National D-Day Museum. So we were just a museum about the Allied invasion of Normandy, France during the war. That was our main story we were telling. And then in 2003, the United States Congress designated us as the National World War II Museum. So we are technically, the national or the American Museum on World War II. So there are other, of course, American museums that tell, certain stories or certain parts of World War II. But when we're all done with our construction here, we will be like the main museum that tells the American story of the war. And so that's kind of how we're different from other museums here in the U.S. and even other international museums that tell, stories of World War II.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
Cool. Do American school children from other states visited the
Yeah, so sometimes we have, of course, a lot of local students that come to the museum. You probably actually just saw some behind me. I think they were waving to you guys. But we do have some includes students from other states. Usually when they have like a spring break, you know, from school or even a summer break, sometimes we have, you know, groups that come here and visit. But most of the students who are your age are from New Orleans. But what I do here, the cool thing about what I do here is I do Skype, I do some other kind of distance learning programs, so I connect students from all across the country. So you guys get to see a little slice of the museum, even if you're, you know, in the next state over or across the world.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hello, Victor.
Hi.
I wanted to know how many people visit the museum in one day?
Well, I can tell you our record. So we have had, I think, 3,500 people visit the museum in one day. That's our record attendance. But I would say, I'm trying to think, on an average, Saturday, I'm trying maybe 1,000 people is pretty busy. So yeah, but it can get really jam-packed here sometimes, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
If you guys don't know, New Orleans is one of the more touristy, there's a lot of tourists that come visit New Orleans. It's a pretty old city here in the United States, you know, relatively old. And so we've got a lot of, you know, historic places that people want to visit here. And so that's why we have a lot of tourists, not only just come to visit New Orleans, but then they also come to the museum too.
Hello.
Hi.
What does your working day look like?
So personally what I do is, you know, as I said, I connect with students like you from mostly, you know, across the U.S., every once in a while internationally. So I do these Skype programs, but I also, I do something called a virtual field trip, and I do another thing called a webinar. But anyway, I do lots of these programs. I maybe do 2 to 3 a day with students from across the country, usually. But you might be wondering what a curator does on a daily basis here. So if you're a curator, you work with artifacts here at the museum, you might sometimes spend your day meeting with donors, people who might be interested in donating their artifacts to the museum. Our curators here, they also they plan some of our exhibits. They plan, you know, we have a special exhibits here that change pretty often, and they plan and they research and they put those things together. And they also care for our artifacts. The kind of cool thing, you guys, maybe I can show it to you out the window because I see it out there today, is our curators, they take good care of our big artifacts. And let's see if you can see it. I don't know, it's really far away, be darned, but there might be a speck there all the way in the back. You all can see our Sherman tank is outside of that big building in the back today. So I know it might look really small on your screen, but our curators moved that tank probably this morning. And so a lot of our World War II vehicles, they still drive, they still operate. And you'll see them sometimes driving them down the street and moving them from our warehouse to our exhibit. And so you can see yesterday, I'll tell you that Sherman tank was inside that building, and today it's outside. So, so they have a pretty fun job.
Thanks.
Yeah.
My question is, do you send some of the artifacts to other museums?
So yeah, we do sometimes loan our artifacts out to museums that might be requesting something specific. Let's say there's another museum that's, you know, they're doing a specific exhibit about something in World War II. We might loan some of our artifacts out, yeah, definitely. But we also, some of our special exhibits, as I was telling you about, so they're not here for very long, only a couple months. Sometimes then we travel those to other museums. So not just one artifact or two, it might be an entire exhibit that we, move from different places, you know, across the country.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and the last question is from me, because this is a part of vocational orientation. These are our senior year students, and they are on the point of deciding what they want to be in life. So my question is, did you always know that you want to be a curator or to work in a museum, or maybe you wanted to do something else? And then you ended up here doing what you do.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So when I went to college, I actually decided that I wanted to major in history and also actually art. I was an art major and a history major in college. And when I graduated, I still wanted to do something with those degrees, but I wasn't quite sure exactly what that was going to be. I was thinking, should I maybe get my master's in history, maybe get my master's degree in fine arts, so like do painting and that sort of thing. But I thought I could kind of use both of those skills, and I actually got my master's degree in museum studies. I know that sounds like a very weird degree, but what I did for my 2 years in my master's program is I studied the many different jobs within a museum. And I spent, 2 years that I was in that program, I spent in an internship at a few different museums in the city I was in. So I think that there I realized I could work, at that point I knew I could work at a children's museum, I could work at an art museum, I could work at a history museum. There was all these options that were open to me with that degree. And then I could be, a curator, I could be an educator, I could, so there were a lot of different roles that I could fill within a museum too. And so it kind of just worked out. And then when I graduated, I applied for this job and got it, and 3 years later, here's where I am talking to you guys.
Okay, thank you very much. There was a lot of information, and I'm sure my students will look something up on Google to find out more. Thank you for this opportunity, and I will post you the pictures and the video to approve before I publish it. Is it okay?
Yeah, great. Sounds wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone. As I said, it's really special to connect with you all. I don't think I've connected with a couple schools in England, but I haven't connected as far as Serbia. So you guys, the Serbian distance was awesome. And I appreciate you. I don't know if you're staying late today because it's 4:30, and our kids usually get up to school at like 3 o'clock here in the United States. So if you're staying a little late, I appreciate taking the time out of the day to connect with us.
Okay. Thank you, and I hope we can do this with my other students some other time.
That sounds great. All right. Bye.
Bye.